the nuts and bolts. I know there's so much to say, but where do we stand, and how do you feel like, what are you feeling now that we've kind of reached this this at least moment of a small victory? Go ahead. And feel free to jump in, whoever wants to jump in.
So I think we'll take it kind of in chronological order, and I'll be very mindful of our time. But before I begin, first, I'd just like to say that we believe this is a moment of celebration, not only because of what we've achieved, but also because of the fact that we all came together, with different strategies and variations in what we wanted, but primarily we were after the same big exemption goal. And I think that we all deserve a pat on the back in terms of having come together in general. And I'd also like to make a comment regarding what Esther said about whether or not the politicians and legislators read Karen Anderson's Facebook page. I can assure you that they do, because the first time I met personally with Lorena Gonzalez, which was in the company of Angie Birchfield and Sol, we asked her about it, and she said, oh yeah, we read it. And back then there were only about 6,000 people on it. And also in those days, Karen had just produced the fabulous compilation of personal stories. And we visited about 19 senators and assembly members on that trip. And I made a point of showing it to each and every one of them, and then later forwarding it to them to their personal email. So we know that they see it. Okay, so the way this started, as you heard, I am a small agency owner. I was concerned about how the effects of AB5 on my livelihood, the livelihood of my business. And personally, I've been a conference interpreter since, I kind of don't want to tell you for how long, but a long, long time. And I have always been a freelancer. I've never, ever been an employee, except for 2 short years when I was a permanent staff interpreter for the free trade area of the Americas. But other than that, I've always freelanced. And so I felt I took this very personally. And Julie and I, as partners, were very concerned about our business together as well. So we started doing a lot of work behind the scenes. And when we realized that people were unwilling to help us or to listen, I came up with the idea of starting this the change.org petition, and it just took off like crazy. I mean, within days, it had thousands of signatures. And so I kind of had no choice but I couldn't give up the fight at that point. And Julie and I were working together at that point regarding AB5. And then I started talking to Angie. For those of you who don't know it, Angie has been very successful in getting pro-interpreter laws passed in California. This is not her first project. We have her to thank every time we put our credentials on the record. She was the one who was behind AB 2270. And I know this, I remember very clearly when we were working together one day, she said, we need a law to stop getting people who are not certified from working in the courts. And she made it happen a few years later. She was also responsible for SB 1160, the workers' comp bill, and most recently for SB 1155, which requires interpreters in small claims. So I knew that she knew people in Sacramento, and she knew how to get things done. So Julie and I partnered up with her. And then at the early stages of our fight in our trips to Sacramento, when we realized that we needed to be working with the medical interpreters, because in the case of interpreters and translators, the reason we were not getting our exemption became very clear to us at the very beginning was because the unions wanted to unionize interpreters in the in-home healthcare services. The union AFSCME, the largest union in the country for employees, intends to unionize a certain group of medical interpreters, and that is why they were not releasing us. So we realized it was essential to work with someone in the know of the different categories within the medical interpreters, and that was Sol Lopez. So that's how we came together. We all knew very clearly that we were not misclassified, and that's why we called ourselves the correctly classified interpreters, because we believe we've always been correctly classified. And I don't want to take all the time up, so I'll give the floor to the others to talk about the specifics, what we did in Sacramento, and how it was that we got our language included in the final bill, AB 2275, or 57 rather, sorry.
Thank you so much. So let's give your group maybe another 2 or 3 minutes, and then let's move on. We will actually give you a chance to get really deep into you know, what you did, and if we can work that into the questions, great. We unfortunately don't have much more time, unless we want to cut the Q&A short. But you know, if we could maybe wrap up your group in another 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you.
Angie, you want to do it, or you want me to? Why don't you go, Angie?
I concur with what Michelle Stevens said. I don't want to take up everybody's time. I'd like to listen to what others have done as well.
Well, I'll just add to that the one thing that really struck me at the end of all this process was I was actually really impressed with the fact that we have so many groups, and different groups did completely different things, and we were not coordinated. Like we just had like, this one is doing this one believes this, the other one believes that. And ultimately, I feel that every single person's role, every single group's role contributed to the end result. And I've sort of learned a little bit like the good cop, bad cop kind of strategy, and the behind the scenes and the public scene. And I think it all really, like, I know in particular Esther and you, David, and obviously Karen, were extremely active in the social media, in the PR aspect of things. You know, some of us were more sort of, you know, knocking on doors, speaking privately with legislators. I did a lot of work with the union, which ultimately said no. And then I think behind closed doors relented, but at the 11th hour, we can talk more about that later. But it was just fascinating to me to see how a whole industry with differing ideas ultimately reached a goal that we should all be really celebrating together. And I really thank you too for, I'm saying Esther and David, for making this meeting. I think it's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. I could wow, agree with every single word. And we could go on about that, but I'll give you a chance to come back to these topics later. Next, let's move to the next group. I'm going to introduce now Madeline Rios and Jose Zapata Calderon that we're working together on this. Madeline Rios is a certified translator and interpreter. She's ATA certified, California certified, and federally certified. She's a member of the board of directors of the Latino and Latina Roundtable of the San Gabriel and Pomona Valleys. And also Jose Zapata Calderon, thank you so much for joining us. He is the president of the Latino and Latina Roundtable and the emeritus professor of sociology and Chicana or Latino-Latina studies. Thank you so much. We'll give you maybe again 2 or 3 or 4 minutes to go ahead and give us your take. I mean, where do we stand now? You know, what are you feeling now that we've kind of reached this small victory?
Okay, Jose, would you like to go first?
Oh, I hope I can talk. I have a very hoarse throat. I did just want to say a few things. You know, one of the reasons a lot of us got involved, and thank you, Madeline, was because when I was a child, I grew up, my parents were farm workers, never learned English. They died not knowing English. So I was their interpreter. And we were able to share those stories with our legislators who we met, which I think had a lot to do with at least bringing the passionate, emotional part. The second thing is that our experience here, and Madeline knows this, we've had a long history of organizing around driver's license and many issues. There were always interpreters who were pro bono, but yet were professional, who were out there working for us. So there was no problem in organizing our community to support this issue. Finally, you know, we had a number of students who are studying to be interpreters, and they fully understood this issue and what it means to be an independent contractor and the sacrifices that interpreters made. I just want to finish that. I think that kind of passion, that kind of emotion, and that kind of history is what not only moved legislators, but has moved our communities. And so you, all of you, have a tremendous amount of support, not only for the work that you do, but for the many sacrifices you have made for our communities to ensure that this is a right and not just, something that comes out of the clear blue sky, but that is something that our communities need. Madeline?
Thank you so much. Anything to add, Madeline?
Well, I think that the role of the community support was very important. And of course, all of the groups could be the straw that broke the camel's back. But one of the things that the Roundtable was able to do was it had a lot of respect from Democratic legislators, which were important to be able to win the change as well. And we did work in a bipartisan way, but because of our history of support for, particularly for the undocumented community and for around healthcare and education, that gave us a very strong position to work from. And so we were able, one of the major things that we got was we were able to get 2 of the Democratic clubs to issue statements in our favor. And particularly the Pomona Democratic Club is mostly people that are union activists. And we got, there were a number of members of the SEIU activists in the SEIU and the UFCW who all voted in our favor based on their understanding of our work in the community. Also, Assemblyman Holden, who is in our local area, was very instrumental behind the scenes in actually submitting language to Lorena Gonzalez in our favor. And that was because, in part, because we had a really good ongoing interconnection with him. And another group that isn't here that's worth mentioning is the California Partnership. And they actually were able to get one of the delegates to the Democratic Central Committee to submit a resolution in our favor as well. So, you know, between that and attending, we had Professor Calderon actually attended 2 of our events with the legislators and actually organized one. And we were able to use we had a 100% unanimous vote from the board of the Latino Roundtable in our support, and they allowed us to use their name, the name of the roundtable, to get some of the legislative visits. So
Great, thank you so much, and thank you so much for your service and for the service of all the groups. We're going to move on and ask the representatives of AGIC and Mariana's group to maybe tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the fight to remain independent, and if you have any thoughts now that we've kind of reached a little bit of a plateau. So to introduce this group, this is Mariana Bension Larkin. Mariana is the president of AGIC, the Association of Independent Judicial Interpreters of California, and a freelance court interpreter. She's state certified, she's federally certified, and she's also a certified English to Spanish translator by the ATA. Thank you for joining us. Make sure you let everyone know who you are. And also Mandy Lee, I don't know if was she able to join? She was AGIC's lobbyist. Oh, great. Okay, perfect. So Mandy was AGIC's lobbyist. We had a chance to speak as well. And she's the founder and principal of Omni Government Relations based in Sacramento. And she spent the last 15 years mastering the dynamics of how politics and policy intersect and she was, I know she was very instrumental in helping AGIC exert some positive pressure on Sacramento. And then Jesus Rivera as well. He's originally from Mexico. He's been a certified interpreter and translator for 20 years. He's been certified in California since 2000, and he's been certified by the federal courts since 2006. I know that he's also been working closely with AGIC on fighting AB5 and getting an exemption for us. Please let us know what comments do you have? How did you get involved? You know, what are you feeling now that we've kind of reached a small victory?
Should I start, Jesus? Are you there? You're muted. Okay. We started this fight in June of last year. After AB5 passed in the assembly. Actually, Jesus flew to Sacramento several times to try to talk to Lorena Gonzalez, and we just kept hitting a brick wall. All we could get, we got to Shubhangi Domokos, who at the time she wasn't her chief of staff. She had some other like legislative aid, and we just kept hitting a brick wall. And then we continued the fight. Then September came, the legislator went into recess, and we knew that starting in January, they would start with all these cleanup bills. So we decided that we had to hire lobbyists, because that's, you know, you need that in order to have your voice heard in Sacramento. So we started a fundraiser in February of this year, and we could raise some money, and then finally we went through a couple of lobbyists, and then finally we hired Mandy Lee in, I believe it was June of this year, and that made a huge difference. For the first time, we could actually talk to Lorena Gonzalez and explain to her that what the problem was, that we did pass the ABC test if we were hired as independent contractors by the courts and by law firms, but that we did not pass the ABC test if we were hired by an agency. So that kind of got the conversation started. And it was a very positive conversation, and the beginning of many more conversations between our lobbyist, Mandy, and Shubhangi Domokos, who by then had become the chief of staff of Lorena Gonzalez. And so that was basically the whole process. Obviously, I'm summing it up. There was a lot of frustration, a lot of setbacks along the way, but basically we feel that we got a very good result, and then we can talk a little bit more about that later and what we feel needs to be done just to fix a little bit, something very small that remains.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thanks again for all that AGIC has done, and for joining efforts with the rest of us as well in fighting, fighting to remain independent. Let's see here. Let's go on now to Amy. Amy represents Najit, and she's a federally certified and California certified court interpreter. She currently serves on the Najit Board of Directors, and she has been working diligently and tirelessly with the former and current Najit board to keep them informed of the developments of AB5 and the amendments and how this affects our profession. So I'll ask you the same question, Amy, again. How did you get involved? What was AGIC's involvement, you know, as much as you can sum up in a few minutes, and what are you feeling now that we've reached this small plateau?
Thank you so much for having me here. I have to say that I personally got involved because Esther Hermida was really warning all of us. Before a lot of us got involved, Esther was really banging the drum, getting our attention to it. And once we all started paying attention, we saw that this really was bad news. And so again, Najit was partnering with AGIC as well. We attended the same meetings, ran into those very same obstacles. And it was very apparent that they were not interested in listening to someone, even if we said we represented thousands of people. And this again was back in June of 2019, before the law was even passed, when it was still at a time when they could have cleaned this up and saved face, so to speak. Najit wrote a letter that was supported by the entire board. We went to deliver that letter, and we even had, some anecdotal data about the fact that people have been in this career for 20, 30, 40 years, successful years as independent contractors, that this is not some fly-by-night, I just started yesterday and I'm a college kid getting exploited by the big bad corporate, agencies out there. But this is a profession that it's long-standing, and like it was mentioned before, this is our business model and it works very well for us. But it was very frustrating and very eye-opening to see, I guess you could call it the confirmation bias of legislators, that if you're not coming with the same story they want to hear, they really didn't want to listen. And I think it was really telling in one of the meetings that Madeline Rios, Jesus Rivera, and I were at Lorena Gonzalez's office, and they said, who's your lobbyist? Meaning, why are you here talking to us? Who's your lobbyist? So that right there, I think, was the beginning of a really big eye-opening experience for a lot of us, in realizing that if we wanted to have a seat at the table, we needed to bring a different game. And I think that's where like I think it was Michelle or Julie who had mentioned the fact that this was a multi-pronged approach at getting AB5, getting the exemption from AB5. I think that was key. And I think going forward, we have to find ways to, again, find a multi-pronged approach when we talk about the PRO Act, because AB5 is really just the beginning. So that's kind of my personal stance and what I've been doing with Najit. And the board currently is also very aware of not only AB5, but the PRO Act. And I think later on in the Q&A, we can discuss a little bit more about what some of those future plans might look like.
Great, thank you so much. So we're going to jump right into the Q&A, and actually, I think we're probably going to stay on this same topic. I'd like to dig in a little bit deeper into what Amy just mentioned. But first of all, I want to give all of the everyone who just presented, all of the different groups, everyone who fought to get an exemption or to remain independent. I just want to give everyone a round of applause. Feel free to unmute your mics and mute them again, but a big round of applause for everybody. Thank you so much for everything that you've done.
Yay!
I guess having everyone unmute their mics is probably not the greatest idea, but it's fine. Live and learn and move on. So on that thought, Amy, or actually anyone who wants to chime in, do you think, the governor's signing of AB 2257, does that put an end to the war on freelancers? Because it's, this is kind of, AB5 is kind of one facet of a push and a misunderstanding of what freelancers, are and why we want to be freelancers, I think, on a national level. Does this, put an end to the war on freelancers? Are we safe now, or what? What are your thoughts on that?
I would actually butt in on this because I read the PDF that was put out by Local 39,000, and there was a paragraph in there that said that they were working to coordinate with the AG, Javier Becerra, to start prosecuting agencies over the use of interpreters. And we don't know which groups they are going to go after, but considering, I'm very close friends with an awful lot of people who are employees of the court, and their wages have stagnated. Their conditions are of work seem to be worse than when I was working there, and yet the 39,000 is putting their emphasis on trying to, prosecute people around independents that they don't even represent. So I think we do have a concern there.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comment on that one?
Well, I can just say as the admin of Freelancers Against AB5 is that AB 2257 is not the end of the war on freelancers. There are hundreds of categories of professions that are still left out in the cold, and a lot of these exemptions are not as rock solid perhaps as some of yours. Some of them still have barriers and caveats and hoops to jump through, and they're making it, even if you're a profession that has been quote unquote exempted through a referral agency exemption or through the B2B exemption or whatever, you still have to, it might be so hard for you to be able to continue to be an independent contractor that you just give up. So we're still, this fight is far from over.
Amen to that. Yeah,
Can I jump
Amy,
in
go
here?
ahead.
Well, I just wanted to mention too that, like Madeline, I do try to keep my fingertips on a lot of different groups, and I've noticed that the court reporters are now kind of wringing their hands. Well, why didn't we get an exemption? We work just the same as the interpreters, but how many of us, I mean, we could probably do a show of hands right now. How many of you over the past year and a half have been at every deposition asking court reporters, so, hey, what do you think about AB5? So, hey, what is your organization doing about AB5? And they say, AB what?
Mhm.
They say, oh, it won't affect us. Oh, they try that kind of stuff and it's not going to affect us. And now all of a sudden they're like, why did they get an exemption and not us? Well, I think the difference is that we realized they were coming for us, they were gunning for us, and we had to do something about it. And we really, really did start doing something about it. And we see the same thing happening with the PRO Act. And right now we're sounding the alarm about the PRO Act, because I get this sensation, and maybe this is now me just kind of seeing, being a conspiracy theorist now. I feel like AB5 exemption was given so that the PRO Act could come and yank it out from underneath us. I kind of feel like that's kind of like sure, we'll give you an exemption, but just wait, and it's going to all disappear.
Well,
And so I don't mean to be a conspiracy theorist, but that's the threat that I see on the horizon.
and
I
I just
sorry.
want to add something to that. Lorena Gonzalez herself was on a Zoom call, conference town hall with Netroots Nation. And she was talking about that very thing just 2 weeks ago. And she said, we're going to continue to put the focus on freelance writers via federal law so that they can circle back around and make sure that everybody across the land, all the freelance writers across the land, have worker protection. So to me, it's like, whoa, I couldn't believe she said that, because it was almost as though she was saying, well, you enjoy your exemption while it lasts. And the fact that she put the focus on writers of all people when she made that statement was very, very chilling to me.
I actually have a little bit of a different perspective, particularly for interpreters, not about the writers, but I think that I think all eyes are on California, because I mean, this is where the AB5 started, and we actually were able to get this exemption, setting an example that it can be done. And I also want to say something that I believe that Lorena Gonzalez, when we met with her, I'm really bad with timeframes exactly, but over a year ago, and then all the meetings we've had with her in her office subsequently, and other legislators, who were writing and who were working with us with actually writing, we were sending them why we wanted the medical included, why we wanted AIC included, why we wanted Department of State. I mean, we were very, very specific, and we documented. We gave her a lot of information as to why each of those groups should be included when we worked with them. And I believe that when I heard her speak after, I think it was after SB 900 was pulled, this was a different Lorena Gonzalez. She had actually learned a lot about our profession. And I think thanks to every single person on this call. She actually, I think she actually came, because at the beginning, she only had the union view, the 4,000 people we were talking about, we were all downtrodden, exploited group. And by the end of the process, she really, she even said that it was a very high rite of passage to become a certified interpreter. So I actually feel that we all in California did a great job in setting the stage. And I think that nationwide, other groups can see that this is possible for our profession. I don't want to mention about writers. I don't know enough about that. But I do feel that we set a really good example for the country, particularly getting organizations like AIC and the Department of State listed in the exemptions. So I feel optimistic rather than pessimistic.
Yeah, thank you so much
David,
for
if I
that
could just
perspective.
weigh in here really quick
Yes,
before we move
absolutely.
on. I think we should all, I think I agree with all the points here. And I think that we should all think of the law as a living document. And all it takes, even though we've struck this deal with 2257 this year, all it takes is a change in the political winds, or Lorena Gonzalez getting some other information from the EDD that points to a problem with respect to a certain industry that will have her come back and change the law. You guys mentioned PROACT. I haven't looked into that at all, but that's yet another example of how the law is a living and breathing document, and whatever we celebrate today could easily be undone. There's also, it sounds like, based on just listening in this conversation, just a lot of a food fight, if you will, between different industries. You guys mentioned the court reporters, I think. And one thing that came to mind just after AB5, the original AB5 passed, was there was an exemption for estheticians and beauticians and cosmetologists and those licensed professionals. Well, the next year after that, after they got their exemption, the next year there was another professional beauty association or something or another, I probably have the name wrong, that came in and asked her for a different configuration of an exemption. And so, that's just yet another example of, the interpreter translator community is so diverse. And all it would take is for someone to come in, make a case to change the law and all that. And I say all that because one of the things that I want to appeal to you all on is don't just come in this year and lobby and do all the great work that you guys have done and then go away. You guys have done stellar work. You guys are super organized and relentless. And I think it made all the difference. And sounds like you guys have hired professionals, lobbyists, including me and others. I would say stay engaged and maintain your presence in Sacramento and even at the federal level. It sounds like you guys need to do that with the PROACT. And don't go away and think that we've scored a victory and we can all go home and celebrate.
Thank you so much, Mandy. Let's segue into from there into a related topic, which is, I think we can probably all agree that California is not. Our industry is not a bubble. Our profession is not a bubble. We get jobs from all of the industries here in California, and we've heard it said that if the entertainment industry and tech industry leave California, we're back to selling oranges. Do you feel like it's important for us to support other freelancers in their fight, to remain independent, and how can we do so? And I wanted to ask that question, and I also noticed that I wasn't aware that Gloria Rivera, who also helped us, who did a lot to help us, in our fight to get exempted and to just be heard on this issue. I wanted to thank her for coming. She's a doctor from Peru and also a certified medical interpreter and certified court interpreter. And I invite her to chime in as well, along with everyone else who's on the Q&A. So anyone have any perspective on that?
Just want to say something, like piggybacking on what Miss Lee said. I don't want to be the ear in the room, but like celebrate. But you know what? We need to understand that this is a long battle uphill. I ended up going to Sacramento, explaining to a Democratic senator how we work, how we benefit from agencies, how agencies are not the enemy. And then I realized, like she said, it depends on what group goes and talks to these people and the sub story they say, they tell. And then that's number one. Number two, Lorena Gonzalez, unfortunately, is very vindictive. So this is an uphill battle. Again, I don't want to be negative. We need to continue doing this because, yay, now we want our exemption in California, but now we have PRO Act that has no exemptions so far. So we need to continue being active. We cannot just sit down and say, what's my association going to do for me? You know, all of us have to learn how to contact our representatives and be there bugging, like Paco said, like continue engaging and bugging everyone. That's the only way we're going to be safe.
Thank you so much. So that brings up a really great, really great point. Do we? Well, I wanted. Okay, so let me segue into community support. I know that we got a lot of community support. We've heard a couple of people tell us about it. Madeline, for one, what do you think the role of community support is in this fight moving forward? And is there any way for us to leverage that, or just organization support from us, so that we are not pitted against legislators, who are trying to make laws for us, but they're just hurting us? Because I want to believe that it's not intentional, and we've brought up the topic of Lorena Gonzalez maybe being a bit vindictive. Is there any way for us to circumvent that and start getting them to unions and politicians to actually work for the benefit of freelancers, or is that a lost cause?
And David, could I just say something on that?
Absolutely.
Madeline mentioned that we were able to get the Democratic clubs to support. One of them meets in the United Food and Commercial Workers, and the stance of unions and what their stance has been on this. And there's been a lot of confusion on their parts in regards to that what the interpreters are doing and these bills are not anti-union. And I think what we were able to do on a grassroots level is, one, we were able to educate and consolidate our base organizations, not only the Latino Roundtable, but even unions like the United Food and Commercial Workers, where we were able to do some education and begin to move them in a different direction. It really took that at the grassroots. And I think that affected then when we met with Portantino and Jose Medina, the same thing. We found out that they really didn't know the intricacies of the bill that was presented, and also the contributions that interpreters made and why they needed to be protected. That kind of work, both at the grassroots level in terms of base organizations, with the unions and with legislators, needs to continue, because as you said, as was mentioned right before, that they can easily turn that around in future legislative sessions if we don't continue that work, and that what really moves it is to have that grassroots support.
Great, thank you. Anyone else on that before we move on?
I'd like to jump in. This is Michelle. I'm catching up a little bit on the past, but I'm going to try to wrap it all into one. Are we still at risk? Absolutely, we're still at risk, not only because of PRO Act, but first of all, we know that this bill is imperfect. It saves us for the time being, but we do know that a lot of people have been left out, other professions. So it's imperfect, and we know that there's no reason, for them to have been left out. But we learned in our efforts that this is all about the union. When we met with the times that we met with the office of Lorena Gonzalez personally and with her staff, the question was always, and what does your union say? Have you talked to your union? It's all about the union. And we believe that that is why we were successful. And let me make this very clear, controversial but clear, that we did not receive the support of our union, of CFI. At no point did we. And it's actually quite upsetting to me personally, and I bet to a lot of people, that recently they came out with a press release saying that CFI and IGA had been involved in getting our exemption. That is not entirely true. I do believe that after we went went through the very, very tedious and time-consuming process of presenting information to the office of Lorena Gonzalez, answering questions. We prepared an FAQ sheet. We gave her numbers, we gave her statistics. We explained why there were some of us that did not need that union protection and the intricacies in terms of the medical interpreters that they wanted to unionize. They want to unionize. That is what's behind this. You know that on the exemption form, when we got the hold of the exemption form, it says at the bottom, you can get your, local 39,000.
Right.
That is our union CFI. 39,000 CFI in the version that I got. So anyway, in the end, IGA came in and said, yeah, okay, let them have it. I mean, this is what we think happened in the 11th hour. We think they said, okay, yeah, let them have the exemption. That is what they're calling support of us. But along the process, they did not. It's all about the unions. That's why we're
I totally agree with you. And I actually have two letters, one from UCW and the other one from AFSCME, which represent home workers, stating that they represent medical interpreters and that medical interpreters do not want to be exempt, and both sent to Tony Atkins and Lorena Gonzalez. So these people that do not represent medical interpreters are claiming that they represent us and that we don't want to be exempt. And this is why I got really upset, because this is not true. I'm sorry that you say that unions. Lorena Gonzalez was very clear. There's a tweet out there because I live on Twitter now. It was AB5 and then a union. The whole plan was turning everyone into a worker and I'm sorry, into an employee that can be unionized.
Absolutely.
Great.
Sponsored
Thank you so
by the
much.
union.
Let's segue into the next question, which is related. How can we get a seat at the table to talk about our rights and what we need, because we are humans, we have rights as well. We have the Bill of Rights, we have the Constitution, behind us. We have a lot going for us, but how can we get a seat at the table, A, and B, how can we keep someone else who does not represent us from speaking for us? Anyone have any input on those questions?
I would like to ask Mandy Lee, who's been a lobbyist in Sacramento for many years, if she can answer that question from her perspective as doing advocacy for so many years.
Sure. Thanks, Mariana. I think that you guys have a lot of great ingredients for success. I think, and just to share a little tidbit with you, when I was doing my rounds with legislators in Senate Labor Committee right before we found out, prior to the hearing, that we were going to get what we wanted, they always said, "Oh gosh, our phone's blowing up because the interpreters are calling." And so you guys have the grassroots and the organization down. Bravo. That is one ingredient for success. There are many ingredients. And the other, to answer the bigger question about how do you guys get a seat at the table, I get the sense that, and I'm only 4 or 5 months into this representing AGIC, I get the sense that this is a very diverse and broad community. And on some level, I think that we are all great and strong as individuals, calling members' offices, writing your legislators, all that, meeting with them, etc. But it almost seems to me that there needs to be more of a, we have this problem with other professional groups in Sacramento as well. There's like 6 different groups for certain professions. It seems to me, and this is all, you guys are all sort of a newer group, all in its infancy, that there is some, it seems to me that you guys would benefit from organizing as either 1 or 2, or maybe ideally 1 group, in my perspective. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, I'm not just saying this selfishly. I think that you guys need a lobbyist, whether it's me or anybody else. I don't care. But I will just say that because you need somebody up here to guide you, to tell you and help you connect the dots, and be your eyes and ears in Sacramento. But the other thing is just professionalizing whatever group that you guys decide to coalesce around. and making a name for yourselves. And that will take time. Some of the most politically successful groups in Sacramento have existed for decades, 50, 60 years, 100 years. The realtors, the dentists, the physicians, they have existed for decades. And they are not only organized how you guys are organized, where if they have something that they're fighting, they'll pick up the phone and call the legislator, but they've actually built that relationship where they know the legislator and they have the person's cell phone or a key staffer in their office to make that connection. And then the last thing that I'll finish with, you know, that kind of ties into how do you professionalize yourself is uniting around one organization, B, hiring a lobbyist, C, some of it will take time, and D is the political aspect, which is another hour-long conversation. But to summarize it in 5 seconds, you know, the dues that you guys pay your organization so that they can do the work that they do is one aspect of it, right? You're funding the administrative existence of an organization, but the political part is, and that's where the dentists and the physicians and the realtors really find their strength, is they create political action committees. And they say, well, we're going to put our money where our mouth is. And we're not talking about a lot of money because it sounds like there's a lot of you out there. I'm talking about a few $100s into a political action committee every year. And if everybody did it in here, you'd actually have a sizable amount of money and you'd actually have a political presence. You'd be able to go to that fundraiser in your representative's district and get to know him or her or his key staff or her key staff and build a relationship so that down the line you can call him or her whenever there's an issue, or that he would or her would call you if something popped up on their radar related to interpreters. That is sort of, you know, a summation in roughly a minute of what it would take in my mind. And I'm happy to continue talking about it, but I think it's probably an hour-long conversation that I probably only have a couple minutes for.
Thank you. Those are some really great points. You know, kind of springboarding off that, you know, and this question is for everyone on the panel. You know, based on your experience, what are some considerations a professional association should take into account when deciding to hire a lobbyist or when deciding to lobby, you know, for the benefit of our profession? You know, anyone who wants to take that, it's a question for all.
I'd like to start on this, if I may. As the current chair of NAGIT and having served on the NAGIT board, I can let everyone know that in a professional association, there are a lot of different things that have to be taken into account. And so the nonprofit status of our associations does allow us to lobby, but we do have to also take into account that when a professional association does begin to lobby, once the association spends over a certain percentage or a certain amount of funds on lobbying, your fees to that association are no longer tax deductible as a business expense. And so some associations are concerned that now, because they've spent you know, a certain amount of money on lobbying, their members can no longer deduct those fees. And so that's also comes into play as far as, do you form a political action committee? Do you know, use your association specifically to lobby? And then if we look at our associations, we have a lot of local associations. We have a couple of national, you know, national level associations. But what brings us together? Because having smaller associations doesn't give us the same power as if we were to all join forces. So I think that's one of the things that specifically NAGIT is looking at, as far as how can we participate in this lobbying discussion without negatively affecting members who simply want to join the association and enjoy the tax benefit of writing off those dues, but at the same time having a presence and having someone who's looking out on a nationwide level and available on a statewide level as well. But that definitely is a concern that comes up. And when you talk about a local association, it's difficult for a smaller association to be able to have the funds to lobby at a national level. So those are just a couple of the issues that I wanted to bring up.
Well, and I like to interject here, if I may. One of the reasons why I started that petition is to get attention to the need I was a non-believer, I'm saying it publicly, concerning AGIC's effort to hire a lobbyist because I thought, it's too late in the game. You know, we're not going to get anywhere. But apparently it was effective. And of course, Mandy's awesome. I had a conversation with her and I truly believe that she was very effective. So I want my associations, the one that I've been paying dues for 20 plus years, to take some kind of action. Do not have an advocate committee because, as we know, they don't do much, and a lot of their personal feelings, if they're staff interpreters and they feel strongly about employment, then they're not going to put their heartfelt feeling into advocating for a lobby. So I'm seeing AGIC's very successful endeavor. I want my associations, including NAGIT, that I'm a big outspoken member, to actually take it a step further. Maybe creating a coalition. It doesn't have to be a single one, but if you have enough ideas, enough things in common, maybe a coalition would be effective. So that's why I started the, and I'm plugging it right now. So if you believe that you want to, and you're a member of either association, please sign it to show your support. And that is all I have to say. Thank you.
Can I just add one little thing? We had a lobbyist from, I don't know, I want to say 6-7 months ago. I just want to acknowledge him too, because I don't know if he's here watching, but he put in a lot of work. We raised funds. Michelle got quite a bit of money from AIC actually and other agencies in order to pay for this lobbyist. And he's been working with us and for us. How many months, Michelle and Angie?
Well, I'd actually like to expand on that. Jason Vega, incidentally, Mandy used to work with Jason Vega. He was the first registered lobbyist on trying to get us our exemption. We know that Coptic had an advocate, but he's not a registered lobbyist. AGIC was working with us when we hired Jason Vega. But that this is the problem here, that because we were all so desperate to get our exemption, there were groups that at the beginning, I think we were more united, but there were groups who would not work with us because we realized that we weren't going to get our exemption unless we gave AFSCME the medical bilingual people that they want. And after that, we were fighting to include certified medicals, but AGIC, according to their, if my understanding is correct, their bylaws, they can advocate only for judicial interpreters. So we have to, it was very difficult. We couldn't have and that's when Jason no longer represented AGIC and Mandy came in. So, but a big shout out goes to Jason Vega. He was the first registered lobbyist.
And I would like to say something if I can. What Amy said is very important, because we have to remember that the ASL interpreters really are the ones who saved us at the end of the day. And that's because, I don't know if you were watching, but I was, when the senators made their decisions and did their votes. And there were 3 senators on the Labor Committee who said to Lorena, but you're going to take care of the ASL interpreters, right? You're going to take care of the ASL interpreters, right? So what this tells me is that this effort needs to be a global one. And that what I mean by that is it has to be the interpreting profession. I always like to give the analogy that we're like doctors with different specialties. And we have different sectors within our profession, and they all need to be included. If one falls, then the other one will. It's like a domino effect, and we just all start collapsing. We needed to get our voices out there. And one of the things that, for those of you that are listening, I've been advocating for the profession for the last 15 years. And one thing I can say is that it's one thing complaining between amongst us, and it's a totally different story putting your face out there and saying, hey, you know what? We're not going to take it. And something that a lot of us need to do is to empower our colleagues and to encourage them to join our plight, because we're just like the three mosqueteros here. You know, we're the same ones who are always pushing. You don't hear much from me, but believe me, I work my tail off for you guys. And I've been doing it for about 1.5 years on this AB5 issue from the very get-go. And I think I'm the one who suffered the most from it, because I was the one that was connected to IGA. So you can imagine how it made me feel, dedicating so much time and effort to freelance interpreters. So my advice to everyone that's here tonight, I applaud you all. I think that we all have something to contribute, but I think that there is a way that we can all combine our efforts. I've talked with Jason about this issue because I'm talking to the ASL interpreters. I've been invited to participate on their task force because we're looking into a couple of things that I think are going to be very important for the profession and in helping us in the future with our plight. And I think that if you have certain limitations within your organization as to how much you can spend on lobbying, it's okay. Because if we form a type of lobbying coalition, if you will, we can contribute to that so that we can have the lobbyist working with us and helping us. One of the things that we need to really remember is now is not the time to be complacent. Now is the time to keep that ball rolling. That's why I've already gotten the ball rolling with some of the key players in Sacramento. I was doing it back in January because I was thinking ahead. And so we have the ball rolling. We need to keep the ball rolling. The only way we're going to succeed is if we all agree to disagree, but come together. Because if we can't do that, then we're not going to get anywhere. We need to accept the medical interpreters. We need to accept the ASL interpreters, community interpreters that work for the school districts. We need everybody on board, everybody. Right. And I mean everybody, because we are fighting an uphill battle. It really, you know, it's amazing to me how every time we want to work on something, it's always something else that pops up. You know, now we have some issues coming from the Judicial Council that are not very good that I just found out about. It's like there's always something. Right. And so, but the most important thing I want to say, and I'm done talking, is we need to put our differences aside and come together as a whole. And then we can succeed at this. And that's what I wanted to tell you guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's move on really quick to the next, and this is a related topic, and I want to give everyone a chance to speak. We also have a few audience questions that I want to get to before we have to end. But it sounds like, you know, we have been put in a little bit of an awkward position because we're all paying dues to national associations. You know, or some of us have been AGIC members or NAJIT members, and it's a little bit tricky, you know, to hire lobbyists through those organizations without, you know, losing the tax exempt status. Does that leave room for us to somehow create a larger umbrella organization or a coalition specifically that will let us lobby and that will let us, you know, have a political presence? I mean, unfortunately, learned the hard way that not having one is very detrimental. Is there room for us to do this, and how?
I'd like to interject briefly.
Just 1 second. If Michelle could explain to everyone what's the difference between an advocate and a registered lobbyist, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people don't know the difference, and it would be good to know.
Well, I don't know if Mandy is still here, but you have to be a registered lobbyist in the state of California to lobby. You can't be an attorney and say, I'm a lobbyist, or you can't, and I don't know exactly what an advocate does. I believe an advocate advocates for something, but is not a licensed registered lobbyist rather, necessarily.
Great.
Okay, I wanted
Thank
to
you.
say something also. I think that one thing that we did, but we haven't mentioned it enough here today, is that we gathered a lot of documentation, and we had people who were reading the law, and you can't expect the lobbyist alone to be reading the law, because we understand our profession. So when we read the law, we can see how it affects us. And when we were working with Mandy through AGIC, together with the activists who were interpreters and translators and her together, we were able to go through the law and see what needed to be changed. So people really have to, you know, do that intellectual part of the work as well. And even the NAGIC poll that was taken of just 100 people was part of the documentation that we used to show that people were not working for one employer, you know, or one would-be employer, that we all were working for, you know, anywhere between 6 and 40 agencies. And so the promise of healthcare and vacations and pension was, you know, the nicest word I could really say was it was a joke. You know, there was no way that we would ever get that. So all that kind of documentation was really important as well. And it took a while for them to take it seriously, but in the end, when they decided they would give us some kind of concession, then they did take that documentation into account.
Great.
And I
Thank you
just
so
want to
much.
clarify,
Yes,
it's not that the associations would lose their tax exempt status. It's that individual members can no longer deduct the dues that they pay to their association as a business expense once the majority of fees are being, or a certain amount of fees, once a certain threshold of fees is paid towards lobbying. So there's a lot of members out there who really maybe don't want or to think about lobbying, but those of us who want our voices to be heard should have a mechanism to do that. And associations can encourage donations to a coalition and donate up to their threshold and still allow members to deduct their fees spent to their professional associations while still promoting a lobbyist coalition.
great. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that. So it sounds like we can agree that there's a major role that organizations have to play, that there's a role that lobbyists have to play, there's a role that individual freelancers, you know, translators and interpreters all have to play, and that we kind of all need to be working together, even if we're working from different angles. Right. So we're coming to the end, and I want to at least get time in for one or two audience questions, but let me ask really quickly, you know, looking back over the past year and a half, you know, if you could sum up, you know, like the big lesson that you learned, or the big, you know, moment of satori that you reached over the last year and a half, if you could sum that up in a couple words, what would it be? And that's a question for anybody.
None of this should have taken place in the first place, because this is all sausage making after the fact. And the exemption that interpreters and translators got were in amendments that were laid on the table on September 10th, a year ago today, when this law was voted, a year ago yesterday, when the law was voted on in the Senate.
Thank you. Anyone else have any
I would like to say something. Well, for me, and I will say something more personal. I haven't been participating as long as you guys have been, all of this fighting for the legislation and everything. I think that a big lesson that I think that I learned, and it will be good that we all learn, is that we can work as a team, respect each other's differences, and also that we have to learn how to compromise to achieve goals, because not always we are going to get everything that we want, and not for that we are going to start to fight against each other. I think that's a major issue. And another thing, I think that, I know that we passed this question already, but I think we're still in danger with this, but not only because laws can change and everything. We are going to have to demonstrate that this gift or this right that was given to us to be exempt is going to work. If this doesn't work, they are going to have the right excuse to put us back where we were before. If all of these regulations or all these laws, they are not followed, people doesn't comply, and they see that they don't work, guess what they are going to do? We are going to give them what they are looking for. And I'm talking about the unions, I'm talking about legislators, I'm talking about everybody who want AB5 to continue, or PROACT, whatever the name is.
Thank you. And anyone want to take one last shot at this, the last question before we move to a couple audience questions?
I also think that we have to help our own colleagues who are not on board with us to understand the big picture, to understand more than just their individual situation, and to help empower them so that they are not being exploited and they understand their options. Because yes, there are bad agencies, and yes, there are people who are misclassified, and yes, there's a place for unions, but that place is not right here with us. And so we need to also be reasonable, just like Sol was saying, be reasonable to accept that some people want to have employment and some people want to have those opportunities, but that doesn't mean that an entire profession should have it thrust upon them. So I think understanding the big picture ourselves, but also helping other colleagues who might be very happy as employees, help them understand that we're also very happy as freelancers, and we can all really coexist.
Thank
and
you.
another thing is that
Yes, go ahead.
people, that are in employment, they were independent contractors once, and they will go back to being them again when they retire. So we need to remember that it's the circle of life, the circle of interpreting, and there's room for everybody. And I think it's just very important for people to understand that.
I like to say something concerning the staff interpreters. I have an amazing respect for a lot of my colleagues who I've known for years and years, who donated money for a cause, who supported us in spite of the fact that they were full-time employees.
Yes, it's true.
So a big shout out to all those interpreters who stood by us, who actually wrote letters, and who pressured their unions too to support us. So yes, they understand that there's room for everything right now. I think the majority of staff interpreters are very supportive of us.
Yeah.
So
I just want to add something that
Yes.
Esther said about that, because you were absolutely right. We actually got a petition. We actually needed for the union members, employees to sign this. It couldn't be anybody. And we got, I want to say in less than 24 hours, about 120 employee union members, full-timers that really had no skin in the game. At least they didn't feel they did, yet they all signed it and they all supported us. So what Esther says is absolutely accurate.
But wait, it wasn't any old letter. It was the letter that contained the exemption language, which is now in AB 2257. In January of this year, we asked our union to support us, and when they would not, we said, hey, let's rally, let's get 24, and we have 24 hours because we had a deadline before we went to meet with Lorena Gonzalez the first time. And we said, let us take this letter to her, signed by a bunch of union members saying, we need an exemption for this category. Well, that is the language that is in AB 2257 today. So it was in great measure thanks to all our colleagues.
If I may say something really quick, I just want to say that just like what Esther said about a lot of support that we got from employees, from interpreters who are staff for the courts, we need to understand that, like Amy said, when we were talking to Shubangi Domokos last year, she was the legislative aide for Lorena Gonzalez. She said, who's your lobbyist? Like, it doesn't matter that you're here. We want to talk to your lobbyist. So I think that every single freelancer needs to understand that when you have an association that fights for you, we need your support. And right now, as far as AGIC goes, we got less than 50% of support from the freelancers in California. Actually, I would say we got less than 25% support. People who donated and people who paid the dues. I think that that's really important for us to understand, that if you want to be represented in Sacramento, you need to support the associations that represent you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. One last question, and we're going to wrap it up. What can we do to send the message, to Sacramento and to the few, people out there who, had it in for us freelancers, that freelancers and employees stand together so that we can prevent this from happening in the future? What can we do to send that message?
Well, I think that what we need to do is empower the ones who aren't talking, and they need to step forward. It's just like when we reached out to people and we asked them to please stand behind us, and we need people to understand that they need to come out of their shell and speak up, because we can talk is cheap, but until you start showing the numbers and the people behind you, then that's when you start to really move forward, is what I think. And I think people need to understand that it's okay. Speak up and join all of us.
Great. Thank you so much. So there were a couple of audience questions, and I think instead of ask the question and get the answer here, I'm going to maybe ask if maybe one of you could point them to the right place. There was a question about who's going to be exempt and under what circumstances. Is it going to have to be a certification? I think that information can probably be found online or in some of the groups or in some of your posts. Where can those interpreters who still don't understand or haven't had the time to read the new exemption amendment and find out who's going to be exempt and what are the circumstances, how can they get clarity on that?
Well, it's go ahead. Go ahead.
I could say, hey, Coptic is having a meeting tomorrow. Why don't you join them? They're having a free webinar. They're not here to speak, and I have nothing but praise for all their efforts. So they may have information. If you don't want to read the law itself, which is very, very easy to understand, they'll probably break it down for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. I'd also like to, I don't know, we're running out of time. I wanted to thank again Esther and David for putting this together, for giving us this opportunity. Thank you. I think it's a very important step of many. And I would also like to thank Coptic and everybody who fought on this, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we all agree with that. Let's give everyone, and ourselves included, a round of applause. My microphone might be the only one that's on right now. But again, thank you so much for joining us. And again, hopefully this will not be a one-time thing. Really, let's build a coalition around this. Let's, whether it's an umbrella organization or join the organizations that are out there. If there's a way that we can make sure that we have representation in Sacramento, let's do it. And thanks again to Coptic, to all of the groups, to everyone who was here. This really has been a momentous occasion, and I hope that we can turn this into the first of many roundtables that we have that protect our industry and that help us really get awareness about the issues that we're facing and how we can fight them. So thanks again for everyone who joined, And I know we have tons of questions that we received. All I can say is that I've looked at the questions, and I think we can answer some of those questions as as posts in some of our Facebook groups. We have several Facebook groups here that are represented. Angie, you have a Facebook group. Esther, you have a Facebook group. We collectively have a Facebook group, Freelancers Against AB5 as well. And so let's just keep the conversation going. Please post your questions, and let's keep the dialogue going. This is, we're just barely digging into AB 2257, and I think we're barely understanding how this is actually going to affect us. And there's also some differing opinions about that. So let's, go out and get information and bring it back and share it with everyone else. That's the best advice I can give everyone at this point. So I think we're gonna call it an evening. Thank you again for everyone for joining. And if anyone wants to say anything, a few last words, go ahead.
I'll say something. David, thank you for a wonderful job.
Yes, I just wrote that.
I appreciate that. So thank you I kind of knew you were going to be great. So I appreciate all the way you stirred the conversation. And I think everybody had their say so. I hope that everybody was able to say what they needed to say. This was to commend you, to celebrate you for the wonderful work that you have done. And it's not just in any individual group, it's a collective effort. And I swear, my heart goes out every time I read about somebody doing this and about doing that. It just warms my heart to see that every interpreter is out there, and translators, but interpreters are more vocal, I like to say. Don't you agree, Madeline?
Hey, I'm a translator. Nobody talks more than me.
Well, except for Madeline. But this is all about you. And I wanted to make it about you. So thank you so much. And I hope the conversation remains open, that we can have this kind of conversations going on back and forth, because that's our objective. I mean, we all want to freelance, for heaven's sake.
We need to.
Amen.
I think, yeah,
Amen
we need to be able to survive. And I was looking at myself, and I was going, oh, well, I kind of made it through the year. And then I realized that I didn't go to the dentist or the doctor all year because I couldn't afford to. So
terrible.
Yeah,
That's not good.
so that this affected us. It had a real effect on us. And we can't just let our ability to earn a living be destroyed. And I think that I once wrote a poem about the friction of injustice keeps you moving. You have no choice. You have to go forward with it.
As young as I may look, I will be retiring very soon. And I want to leave this profession as a legacy and not in shambles.
My feelings exactly. My feelings exactly. I think it's been Amen. It's been a good profession for me. I want that for the future generations. Exactly. I want them to experience what we have experienced, the freedom to make a living, a very decent living, and not anyone. I can't stand. I don't want anybody in my way. And I just want you to say, to realize that interview from the LA Times that happened in September of 2019, I said, when the reporter asked me, what are you going to do? And I said, fight, of course. And that's what we've been doing ever since. Yeah. So I want to end with
everyone, go pour yourself some champagne, congratulate yourself, pat yourselves on the back. Mine will be non-alcoholic, but I'll leave that up to you.
Thanks to everybody here. I'm so pleased to be part of this great group. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
Especially you, Esther. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.